Hey boys and girls, the story is called Lost on Ellis Island. This is a picture of Ellis Island. The story is by W.M. Akers. To get to Ellis Island, you have to take a boat. I'm going to try and show you my thinking on some of while we read, okay? So when I'm annotating, I'm thinking, that's kind of funny. So I'm going to circle Ellis Island because I'm not too familiar with that and say, what is Ellis Island? That's my question for this page. Okay, that's what I've done. From 1892 to 1954, many people came here from across the ocean. Millions of immigrants from Europe and beyond came to America through this tiny little island where they were processed, checked for disease, and sometimes given a new, more American-sounding name. I'm going to put a connection here because I know that my family, when they came from Poland, they changed their name to sound more American. So that's a connection that I have, and I would write that down. So if you have a connection like changing your name to sound more American or sound more English, this would be a good place to write that connection. Stepping into Ellis Island was the end of a long journey and the beginning of a new life. But for Emily Dalton, it was just another day on a family vacation. Emily, her parents, and little brother Max had been to New York City before, but they had never visited the museum on Ellis Island. I'm going to put a connection here because I've visited the museum on Ellis Island, and you guys might have a connection because we're visiting a museum on our field trip at school. They took a boat there, too, coming not from Europe, but on a little ferry from the southern tip of Manhattan. Emily had wanted to see the Statue of Liberty, but the family outvoted her. The Statue of Liberty might be a connection for some of you. Think of it this way, Em, said her father. You can look at the Statue of Liberty on the boat ride over. Emily stared at the big green statue as their ferry docked at Ellis Island. More than anything else, she wanted to climb to the top of Lady Liberty and look at the New York harbor from high up there. Instead, it was time to visit another museum. See you later, she said to the statue as they disembarked. That means left a ship. But if you weren't familiar with that word, this would be a good word to circle, a good unknown word to circle. Maybe next summer. Top of page 2. Emily and her family had been in New York for 4 days. In that time, they had done nothing but walk, and visit more museums than she could count. They saw art museums, science museums, and history museums. There was even one boring museum all about pieces of paper. Between all the museums and crushing July heat, Emily was nearly asleep on her feet as they walked onto Ellis Island. I might put a question here. My question is going to be something about Emily. So I might say something like, why does Emily not like museums? Or I want to know more about this piece of paper museum. Like, where is this museum? Okay, those would be some good questions to ask. The main building on Ellis Island has 4 big turrets. That's a word I don't know. I'm going to circle that word. And looks a bit like a castle. Inside is a huge main room, the registry room, where immigrants once waited in line for permission to enter the country. To the sides are lots of smaller rooms, which hold different exhibits about the island's history. Registry. I'm going to circle that. I see a word in there, though, that I do know. It looks like register, so maybe that'll help me figure out that word. Oh, wow, Emily said. Exhibits. Emily, if you're going to grump your whole way through the museum, said her mother before pausing for a few moments, well, just don't. Have you ever been in a grumpy mood? I know that sometimes Miss Barrick is in a grumpy mood, so that could be my connection. Sometimes I'm grumpy. Oh my gosh, Dad, squealed Max. They have an exhibit all about maps. Max loved maps. Emily did not. The thought of spending 2 hours watching Max coo over 100-year-old maps made Emily fear she would actually fall asleep where she stood. Coo, that's a weird word. "You guys go on ahead," she said. "I'm going to poke around in the gift shop." "Okay," said her dad. "We'll meet you back here at 4 to take the last ferry back." "Sounds great." As Emily's family walked excitedly toward the map room, Emily felt her chest loosen slightly. She loved her parents and brother, but there wasn't such a thing as too much family vacation. Now that she was by herself, Ellis Island didn't feel so bad. She was walking toward the gift shop, thinking about purchasing a new mug, when a machine caught her eye. The sign said "Family Records," and it made something stir inside Emily's brain. I also kind of see a connection here, because sometimes when I'm on vacation with my family, I can get kind of tired of them too. So some of you might have a connection of sometimes when I spend too much time with my family or my friends, I get kind of annoyed. She remembered 2 Thanksgivings ago when her grandfather told the story about he had immigrated to the United States as a child. He was only 7 years old. Some of you guys came around that time, right? So some of you guys have come to the United States. So that might be your connection. But he remembered standing in line in a long room in a building that reminded him of a castle. He said Zamek, back in Poland. "I wonder if this is the same room," said Emily as she began navigating the computer screen on the records machine. Without her family there, she was allowed to feel excited. She typed her grandfather's name, last name first. "Dalton, Stanley. Records in the archive match your search," said the machine. "No records in the archive match your search," said the machine. "Darn," said Emily. She was sure her grandfather had described Ellis Island. Wait a minute. She remembered that when her dad had told her about people's names being changed when they came to the island. The American government forced people to take new names as a way of making them fit in better in their new country. Stanley Dalton wasn't a very Polish-sounding name. That Thanksgiving, her grandfather had told them that his given name. Emily bit her knuckles as she tried to remember. Okay, so if you've ever had a name change or called yourself something different so it's easier to pronounce, that might be a good place to write your sentence connection. Stanislaus Dombrowski. A name like that, Emily thought. You don't forget. She typed it in, and there he was. A picture of an old piece of paper came up covered in squiggly handwriting from January 12th, 1930. On line 12, Emily found her grandfather, Stanislaus Dombrowski, whose name was changed to Stanley Dalton. He was from Warsaw, it said, and had never been to the United States before. He was 7 years old and in good health. There was information about his parents, too, and his younger sister. Emily read everything she could about the Dombrowski family, and then started searching for other people. She searched for her friends' families, for famous people, and any random name that came into her head, and many of them had come through this hall. She was so engrossed that she forgot the time. Engrossed. That's a weird word. I see the word gross in there, but that being grossed out doesn't really fit with this sentence, so I'm going to have to look that word up. And was shocked to hear the announcement. It is 4 o'clock. The last boat leaves in 5 minutes. Emily looked up and saw that the hall was nearly empty. Her family was nowhere to be seen. She ran down the hall, peering into the exhibit rooms, bathrooms, and the coat check. "Max!" she shouted. "Mom! Dad! Dalton family! Dombrowskis!" When she realized that she was the last person in the hall, she panicked. Have you ever been panicked when you think you're lost? That might be a good place to put a connection. I know I have. She ran out of the entrance and up the ramp to the ferry, getting there just 15 seconds before it left the island. She found her parents sitting in front of the boat. "Hey, Emily," said her mom. "You left me behind." "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. We thought you were on the upper deck with your brother." I'm going to put a question here. Why does Emily's mom think she is with her brother? Especially since her brother is kind of annoying to Emily at the beginning of the story. That seems kind of strange. "We were supposed to meet at the Great Hall at 4. I think we said we would meet at the boat, dear." Emily knew her mother was wrong, but she was too tired to argue. Her vacation stress had returned. She slumped into her seat, watching the castle of Ellis Island grow smaller behind her. As Stanislaus Dombrowski had learned nearly 100 years earlier, she realized then that as nice as it is to get to Ellis Island, it's even better to catch the boat to Manhattan. I'm going to put a connection there because I've been on a boat and it's been nice to come home. So I'm always happy to come back home. This might be a place where you could think of a question too. I'm going to let you guys do that one, okay? So maybe think of a question that you could ask on that page. Here we go. Here's another story. The Twilight of the Italian Social Club. Okay, and this story is actually by Readworks, and this is a picture of New York City a long time ago in a place called Little Italy, I think. So let's go down here. During the 1800s and 1900s, immigrants from all over the world began moving to New York City in large numbers. They were coming to seek a better life for their families. Some of us have a connection there, right? Some of us came to America for a better life, so that would be your connection. Often, immigrants in a certain ethnicity lived in the same neighborhood. In New York, many Italians lived in neighborhoods like Little Italy in Manhattan. Most of the families lived in cramped apartment buildings called tenements. That's an interesting word. I'm going to circle that word. Because the tenements were so small, people spent a lot of time outside. Some ethnic groups formed organizations called social clubs. These social clubs were housed in small clubhouses where people, particularly men, could hang out and talk. I'm going to write a question here. What was it like to be in a social club? The social clubs became the centers of many neighborhoods. They were places where men could gather after work and where families could gather on special occasions. During holidays, many of the social clubs held parties. If a family of the neighborhood needed help, the social club might get together to help them. Membership in these clubs was a privilege. A member was required to pay dues to the club. When a neighborhood boy was allowed to join his local social club, it was like a rite of passage for him. It meant that he was one step closer to becoming a man. I'm going to put a connection here because I know of many cultures that have rites of passage to become a man. Okay? So I know in Judaism, at age 13, you can become a man. I know that in Latino culture, this is often with like a quinceañera, a quince, okay? Even though that's not a man, same sort of idea. Let's go to this page. Page 2 of the story. Perhaps the group of people with more social clubs than anyone else was the Italians. Italians had social clubs not just in Little Italy, but in many other neighborhoods, like Bensonhurst and Carroll Gardens in Brooklyn. The Italians saw these clubs as an important way of maintaining their native heritage. Sometimes members of these clubs would be from the same region of Italy. While the members of these clubs were all Americans, they still celebrated certain Italian holidays. Many of the clubs would play Italian music and cook Italian food. Local politicians would often drop by the clubs at election time to try and get votes. I'm going to put a connection here, and you guys can write in one way that your family kind of keeps their culture alive, okay? So one way that my family keeps our culture alive is we call my grandmother a shortened name for babushka. So I could write, my family still uses some non-English words. That's my connection there. However, I like that transition word. As New York has changed, many of these Italian clubs have disappeared. Italians have moved out of Manhattan and Brooklyn to other areas, such as the borough of Staten Island and the state of New Jersey. As other groups have moved into these ethnic neighborhoods, the membership of many clubs has declined. As members have gotten older or died, fewer younger Italians have taken their place. This has led to many of the social clubs closing. While New York used to have dozens of Italian social clubs, only a handful are left now. I'm going to ask my question because I want to know exactly how many are left now. How many clubs are there? I bet I could Google that. Today, however, some of these social clubs are still going strong. For example, the Van Westhout Cittadini Malisi in Brooklyn's Carroll Gardens neighborhood still has several hundred members. The club was founded by men who have immigrated from a small town in Italy, Mola di Bari. Now, most of the members are from other places, but they are still of Italian descent. Ooh, that's an interesting word. That reminds me of our vocabulary word descend, to come down. While many of them still live in Carroll Gardens, some live in other neighborhoods but still drop by the club to see their old friends and neighbors. The clubs that remain continue to be important parts of the neighborhoods. Every July 4th, one of the clubs in Carroll Gardens holds a party to which everyone in the neighborhood, Italians and non-Italians alike, is invited. The social club fills a pool in the parking lot and serves pasta and cannoli, an Italian dessert. Ooh, that's my connection. I love cannoli. It's like a cream-filled dessert. This is a nice way for people in the neighborhood to get to know each other more over Italian food. The neighborhoods around the remaining Italian social clubs are more diverse now. You can find people not just from Italy, but from dozens of countries, each with different ideas and rituals. That's an interesting word. I'm going to circle that word. These clubs have evolved to help people unite from many different cultures, but they continue to preserve a specific ethnic tradition. So my question is, are there clubs for non-Europeans? Because a lot of this article has been about European immigrants. I want to know if there's clubs for non-Europeans. All right, let's look at our questions. Use the article Lost on Ellis Island to answer questions 1 and 2. So you're going to use this first story, okay? 1. What was Stanislaus Dombrowski's name changed to on Ellis Island? So the first thing I'm going to do is turn the question around, cross out my question word, circle my subject. These seem like my important words. This is my verb. So now I'm going to turn that around. My subject is Stanislaus. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Dombrowski's name. Now I need my verb because I have my subject. Was changed to blank on Ellis Island. So if I were you, I would go back on the text and I would look for the word name. Maybe even this big, long Polish name. That might help you find that answer. Why did the American government force people like Stanislaus Dombrowski to change their names? So this is another one where you can turn that question, think about what we did up here, and find your answer in the text. Okay, so why? Not what did he change his name to, but why down here. Use the article, The Twilight of the Italian Social Club, to answer questions 3 and 4. Some ethnic groups formed organizations in New York City during the 1800s and 1900s. What were these organizations called? So this is our turn the question. So cross out that question word. Circle these important question words. So these organizations, and then my verb, were called blank. And then this would be a good place for you to put evidence. So I know this because, and you know how to do the rest. On page blank, paragraph blank, the text says blank. Number 4. Read these sentences from the article. Perhaps the group of people with more social clubs than anyone was the Italians. Italians had social clubs not just in Little Italy, but in many other neighborhoods, like Bensonhurst and Carroll Gardens in Brooklyn. The Italians saw these clubs as an important way of maintaining their native heritage. How might social clubs have helped the Italians maintain their native heritage? Support your answer with at least 2 details from the article. So, I'm going to turn that question around and then give myself 2 details of how this helped them. Remember that they were Italian. That's what it's asking. Maintain their native heritage. Stay Italian. Okay. Use the articles The Twilight of the Italian Social Club and Lost on Ellis Island to answer question 5. Imagine a man who moved to Italy from New York City in the 1900s and had his name changed on Ellis Island. Would having his name changed make him more likely to join a social club afterward? So, if you had your name changed, would you want to join a club and stay like your past, or would you want to move on from your past? Support your answer with evidence from one or both texts. So for this one, I need evidence and explanation. I know this because, and this means.